Excellent, there we go. Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Collins. I am a student recruitment coordinator here at NSCC. Today's webinar session is going to be focusing on our plumbing and carpentry programs throughout the province. So all over, all NSCC campuses that offer the programs. Joining us for this session, we have Jacob and Tyler, who are both from our Cumberland campus, but two different locations of the Cumberland camp, two different locations, two different areas. Tyler is at our Spring Hill location, and then we have Jacob, who's at our Amherst location. Hello, you two.
Hello. Hello.
Now, before we dive into our carpentry and plumbing programs, I do want to do a couple housekeeping items. First and foremost, of course, is a land acknowledgement. I'm located at our IT campus, and I do want to recognize that the NSCC campuses are sitting in Mi'kmaq, the unceded territory and ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq Nation. Our relationship is based on a series of peace and friendship treaties between the Mi'kmaq Nation and the Crown dating back to 1725. And in Nova Scotia, we recognize that we are all treaty people. Now, with this webinar, it may be, or the platform may be a little bit different than something that you have used in the past or some other webinars that you've been a part of. So we've automatically disabled your webcams and your microphones. So if you are multitasking right now, maybe you're commuting, maybe you are at school, maybe you're doing the dishes, whatever it might be, you don't have to worry about your microphone or your camera accidentally turning on because it has been disabled. But I do encourage you to ask questions using the questions tab, typing out those questions, and we can answer them throughout the session. If you do have questions afterwards, you can send an email to recruitment@nscc.ca, and we'll be sure to answer any questions that you might have. So we can head into things. This is going to be Tyler that's going to start things off by talking about the carpentry certificate. And then he'll move on to the carpentry diploma. So a 1 year versus a 2 year program. Awesome, take it away, Tyler.
Perfect. So hello, folks. Really, you've got some bullet points that are on the screen there for you right now. I work in the diploma program, although I work in first year of the diploma program, which is exactly the same as the courses and qualifications you get out of the certificate. So with the certificate program, you can see our locations there, Ackerley Strait and the Wigman-Cook Learning Center, Lunenburg, and Ivany Online part-time. That's kind of a blended one. But the certificate takes 1 year. What it'll give you is a lot of introductory skills to construction. So some of the courses that you'll see in it include, but aren't limited to, tools 1, 2, and 3, which would be hand tools, portable tools, and stationary tools. Construction safety, which is really a big thing for us. And within construction safety, we also have safety milestones. So we cover off some specific topics, like, for instance, confined space. We do have a recognized and certified fall arrest course. So you can actually do fall protection, fall arrest here. And it is part of our program. Introduction to hazard ID, lockout, tagout, occupational health and safety, respiratory protection. Those are all some of the stuff that happens for the safety side. As well, you'll get some training in blueprint interpretation, as well as construction mathematics. So I know for my end of the math, I start really with basic mathematics, because a lot of folks struggle with that. And then by the end of the math semester, for me in first year, we move right into the actual construction aspect of it. We've got a pretty decent little textbook with that that goes along with that. So aside from that, we also have foundations 1 and 2. So foundations 1, we start to learn about layout of buildings, what types of foundations will kind of look like, and the bases that support them. So piers, piles, footings, etc. We do some work with layout instruments like theodolites, builder's level transit, rotary laser, etc. In Foundations 2 in the second semester, we start to look at wall forms. And my students actually just today were up on the compound and we were putting up a wall form system for DIR forms. So we do that. The other thing that's in there for us, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm somewhat close to the list, is Framing 1 is what we're calling it right now, and that covers floor framing and wall framing. To be quite honest, last year my class actually built the lab that Jacob's in this year. We did that as our competency, so we built all the walls and the floors and assembled it so that they could use it for their plumbing mock-up. My guys, or my class I should say, was in the process of doing that just before forms. One of the other things that we do that is an excellent thing here at NSCC is at the end of second semester, we have a work experience, okay, or a work placement, some folks will call it. It's a 5-week, 40 hours a week where you go out into industry, you find someone to work for, and you apply some of the stuff that you learned in a real world environment. And to be quite honest, also learn a lot of things that, that we can't necessarily cover the same way they can in industry. And that is one of the things that unfortunately we're education, we're not industry, so it's not exactly, but we try and mirror the best we can to what the standards and experiences you'll have in industry, to be quite honest. And I think I've hit almost all of the courses. There is a workplace mentoring one in there as well. That's a pretty small milestone, to be quite honest. But that, and the one thing I will mention is communications. So there's a communications 1 and 2 course. Those are ones that are taught by related subjects instructors. So I don't actually teach communications. However, they do try and coordinate with us to make sure that projects and assignments that meet the outcomes of those courses are in line with the trade program that that we're looking at, and we try and work together on that. So that's kind of the quick rundown on courses that are in there. I guess one of my things would be the 1-year program's a really good introduction. If you might have some fair to decent experience in the industry already, it would help to confirm some of the good practices. It would help to eliminate some of the bad, and give you a bit of knowledge on building materials, fasteners, basic mathematics, measuring layout, basic foundations, basic framing, and of course all the tools complements it in there, blueprint reading as well, to get you started as a first-year apprentice on a job site after you're done the certificate program. The other thing too, I do believe, and I'm trying to look to see if it's in here on their curriculum document, but I do believe you get 900 hours accredited towards your apprenticeship once you complete that. And that's when you leave the program and go on there. So I guess I don't know if they can operate their microphone, but other questions, or we're going right into number 2, are we? Diploma program?
Yeah, no questions yet, but I will remind everyone that if they do have questions, they can type those all throughout the session and I'll be monitoring it.
Perfect. Just interrupt me if there's something you want added, or if somebody has a question, I am more than happy to answer it as it goes. So the diploma program is the one I work in. I do happen to kind of work in the first year of the diploma program, so it really mirrors certificate. In the second year, some of the things that we do a little different is we have Framing 2 courses that are going on. Framing 2 starts to happen where we look at roof framing. So we'll do the ceilings and roof, hip, gable, and all that other stuff. And I'm going to continue on the year 2 because year 1 of the diploma program is the same, and I'll kind of give a little extra on that in a second. They also do interior trim, introduction to common stairs. They'll also look at engineered roof systems and intersecting roof systems in that framing portion as well. I said gable roofs and hip roofs, siding and cladding, so basically exterior finish. It's connected in some of those siding and cladding courses and whatnot for things like window and door installation. So that's done as well. We try and make sure that we get a little bit of interior finish going on for some base functions of it. To be quite honest, if you look at the occupational analysis, and I think they've changed the name of them now, but that's basically the book that says what a carpenter does according to the Red Seal program the federal government has. Really, a lot of the higher end interior finish is until 3rd block, etc. So that'd be the 3rd year that you're in your apprenticeship. So we do try and mirror, although it's not exact, the apprenticeship side of the house. We do get accreditation for the first and second years. One of the other things that's in second year, and I touch on it because there's no way I can avoid it, is building science fundamentals. So when I say building science, sometimes that sounds pretty flashy, but really it's looking about how heat and air and moisture move all throughout the building and how we stop and or eliminate that or prevent or allow something to dry. Basically living inside of a plastic bag when you look at any framed building at the end of the day. And we look at, why do we put the plastic up? What does it do? How does it work? And what are some of those physics laws that apply to moisture movement, heat movement, etc. And how do we incorporate that into the building? It also can get into a good little discussion, to be quite honest, because it is something that we look at. At least I talk about in framing, about green framing, and that's not anything really far-fetched or way off the normal center. It's changing small things in the building envelope so that it actually helps to make the house either passive solar or help minimize the carbon footprint as we actually frame. Casework fabrication, casework design is another thing in second year that they do, and they also do a trades communication course. I'll be quite honest, in my personal opinion, of course I'm biased because I'm the first year instructor, there's a lot more theory-based learning in the first year because understanding building materials, fasteners, adhesive sealants, all that other stuff, and getting your hands onto the tools to be able to do maintenance, to understand the different bits, blades, and whatnot that actually are available to us, it's a little bit more. Because one of the questions I almost always get, and hopefully this will answer it if somebody's sitting there waiting on it, is what does your class days look like? So I would say that in the diploma program, we're a little bit different between first and second year. In first year, most of my days are closer to a 45-50. So we'll spend most of the morning usually in a theory class, and then we spend the afternoon in the shop and or compound. And that's just because depending on the level of experience that folks have coming into it, depending on the topic, sometimes spend a little bit more time on theory before we get hands onto the project is good. And I do try and go back and forth sometimes. Sometimes I find I'll have a class that does better doing the hands-on before they digest the theory. But I find generally a little bit more theory prep before we get in there is usually more efficient use of our time. So like I say, about a 45-50. I know in second year with my current counterpart, he's definitely a 60-40. And when I say 60-40, I should really say 40-60. He's definitely in the shop more. And there's some days where I would even say it might be a 20-80, just depending on the topic. But that's also after a full year of first year. And most folks generally go and work in the industry over the summer. So they're coming with some experience from framing, et cetera, throughout the summer. And I'll be quite honest, it's kind of nice in the second year, at least I'm told, because folks do have a little bit more of a grasp on the trade. They've been out for a few months and they're lending those skills and that learning that they would have got, even if they didn't work all summer, but on their work experience. They're lending that in second year, which allows them to go a little further, a little faster into the shop environments. And hopefully that makes sense to folks. There's 2 work terms instead of 1. So there is a work term at the end of year 1. There is a work term at the end of year 2. And to be quite honest, depending on where the class goes, and I say where the class goes, I try, and I've worked at several campuses delivering carpentry. I try and make sure that the student interest, so I worked in one location, and I won't disclose where it is because I don't want anyone to pinhole or think that one location is better than the other, because it's not necessarily. It really depends on where you're at in life and what you're going for. But they were really focused on some green energy builds and things like that. So if there's an interest in the class and it applies to the outcomes and the learning, I definitely try and target that and run with that, because if you guys are more interested, it makes my life a lot easier. And sometimes that means going out of my comfort zone or going out of my zone that might be what I would consider my area of expertise or specialty. And that's good too, because it's great to learn along with the students and to be presenting stuff, especially if they're interested. I taught apprenticeship as well, besides just the core program here. And I'll be honest, there were a couple of classes that I taught where I turned it over to a student because the student in apprenticeship is working Monday to Friday, 40 hours a week generally. And in carpentry, especially, we're a trade that's really, really broad with lots of different little subs and specialties that you could do. And I had one in particular case, it was wood frame foundations. And some of you might be sitting there going, wood frame foundations, what? Yeah, it's not something I've personally done. I framed a wall, which is very similar, although it's still a little bit different. But I had a student who worked for a company that did the highest number of wood frame foundations east of Quebec. So I was able to use their expertise in the classroom to augment what we had for regular delivery. And I'll be quite honest, it's something that I think we value here at the college in general. So that's the length. The one other thing I will say is 900 hours for the certificate. You get double that for the diploma program, accredited to your apprenticeship. So really it works out to be about 1 full year of apprenticeship hours and 2 years of training. So some may say, well, how come I don't get 2 years of hours? Well, we really don't put in the same amount of hours as industry. So they don't credit it that way. It's almost at a 50%, which is actually quite reasonable. If you were to compare some of the stuff you'll do in industry and on the job site versus learning at the school, and not to say that it's I don't want anybody taking it as a negative. I think it's really a bonus. One of the things I say to my students every year is we're a really safe place to make mistakes. I'm not encouraging folks to make mistakes all the time, but it's how we learn. So if you miscut a 2x here in the classroom, even though they're at $10 a pop now, it seems like I'm not going to have a meltdown or a fit about it. Whereas there could be on a job site that might not be a 2x. Maybe it's a piece of cherry wood for some trim, and you mistake it for scrap. That's going to affect the bottom line of the company. You know, part of our business is actual education, and having a safe space to make some mistakes once in a while is a good thing. It's not like I'm out there saying just cut her up until it's all gone. We do measure twice and cut once, the old adage. But if you happen to make a mistake, as long as we learn from it, it's not a mistake. To be quite honest, it's just good learning. So I think that's it for the carpentry diploma. Do we have any questions or anything there?
Yeah, we do have a question, and it's going to be related to both plumbing and carpentry. Someone's asking about the part-time blended offering. So if either of you have any information on that, particularly about would it be possible to complete the program or programs, one or the other, while working outside of school. If someone is working full-time but would like to seek a career change. So if it is part-time and blended, you may be able to work while completing the program part-time. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can only speak for the carpentry blended, and I've never worked it, but I do know Colin, who delivers the carpentry blended, quite well. Most of his classes are evenings, afternoons, and weekends. And almost all the students that are there, if what I'm gathering from his information, they are people that are either working really a lot of part-time hours or they're working full-time hours. Of course, that's going to be a big thing on the person themselves to make sure that they're driven enough to make sure the studies are getting done. But it would be something that you should be able to manage to. The way I understand the blended carpentry, and I'll speak specifically to that because I don't know how it all rolls for plumbing, and then I'll be quiet, is the certificate program, which we deliver here as a full-time study, happens over 1 year. The same certificate happens over 2 years in the part-time study for the blended portion. So it should be something that's reasonable and feasible, I would think.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Same thing here on the plumbing side with the part-time. It is an option. I think it's mostly evenings and weekends as well. The duration of the program goes from 1 year certificate to 2, if I'm not mistaken on that. So it's definitely feasible for somebody who's able to balance working as well as studying for industry. So there's full-time, there's blended, and there is part-time as well. So full-time is just as it sounds. You would go, a typical day would be 8:30 to lunchtime, likely in the classroom. And then in the afternoon, there'd be a after lunch, say 12:30 to 3 o'clock session in the shop, in the lab for the hands-on practical component of the program. And I myself teach a blended model of the core level plumbing, which means that everything is pretty well done in-house at the campus, all except for the Communications 1 and the Communications 2 courses. So obviously there's one for the first semester, one for the second semester, and they're usually done on Fridays online. So typically At this campus, we would go Monday through Thursday, and we would have full-time hours split between the classroom and the shop or the lab. And then on Fridays, the students would take their communications blended online at that time on Fridays. So there's the full-time, the part-time blended, and the full part-time as well available. So hope that answers that.
Yeah, I think that's good. Thank you so much, Jacob and
No
Tyler.
problem.
And Jacob, I'll pass things on to you to talk a bit about the plumbing certificate.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Megan. So we have a 1-year core program here, a certificate. You can see that it's offered in the Valley, Cumberland, IT campus, Kings Tech, Marconi, and Pictou campus. There is flexible learning options, like we just mentioned there, full-time, part-time, and blended. We touched on those there. So with plumbing, you can learn how to install and repair water distribution, sanitary drainage systems, and hot water heating. Plumbing certificate prepares you for many different areas of work, from the manufacturing industry, institutional maintenance, service industry, sales, and plumber apprentice. So typical day here, at NSCC with plumbing would be, like I mentioned earlier, usually in the morning is more of the theory, the classroom side of the program, and then the afternoons are typically the practical component in the shop or the lab. Safety is the top priority and main concern as we do learn the trade. There's no experience needed for anybody to come take this program. There's safety milestone courses that are typically done on the students' time after school, so in the evenings or when they want to work on them. So they have a Brightspace format on their computer. They're able to go on and track their marking and assignments and schedule calendars, that type of thing. And included in that would be the safety milestone courses. Some of those include like hazard identification. Tyler mentioned like lockout, tagout, WMIS, for example, certified fall arrest, which is great. The college provides full certification in fall arrest, which is needed on a lot of the job sites nowadays for safety. And in the plumbing side of things, on the blended side or in the communications 1 and 2, they do creative writing, resume, all these things to build their skills in communications. That's usually done with a different instructor. And then on the plumbing side of things, we have courses like safety tools and equipment. So obviously safety is a top priority and a main concern. Here we do offer enjoyable, stress-free learning. It doesn't matter in plumbing if you've never used a screwdriver before, or you changed a relative's taps and now you have experience. We pretty well go right back to the fundamentals, not only with the hands-on, but with the mathematics and the theory as well. So after we do safety tools and equipment, we would then do like metal or ferrous piping. So we would do like cast iron and steel piping, such as like threading steel pipe, like you see in the photo there. The two students are cutting some male threads using the pipe machine in the shop. We would also join cast iron drainage and waste and vent fittings together. And then we would move on to the plastics like PEX piping, copper piping, different joining methods, safe work practices, the theory behind them. Then we do blueprinting, and then usually that completes the first semester. Second semester, we get into drainage. So when we're talking about plumbing systems, we get into just the drainage portion. Then we get into a course just to inventing. So obviously in plumbing, it's also very important to make sure there's a supply of air and an exhaust to help the drains work in a proper system. Then we move into water supply and water distribution. We also do fixtures, appliances, and trim, and hydronic heating is usually the last course that we do to round out the winter semester. We're actually almost to that point now. Next Monday, the 25th, at the end of the course, the students go in for a 5-week practical work experience, which is part of the program. They'll job shadow a business at location of their choice, and basically obtain 175 hours, I believe, for that in 5 weeks. And after that, they have a very good foundation of skills and knowledge to obtain employment in a very high demand industry. So they basically leave here with 900 hours, which works out to be roughly 1 year's worth of hours. And they are that closer to becoming a second-year apprentice. So when the student leaves the core program with plumbing, they're automatically a first-year plumber with 900 hours credited towards their second year. And at that time, they'll be able to make 50% of journey person wage. So that's usually set by the industry, by the employer. So however much that they're paying their Red Seal journey person, our students will leave after 1 year making 50% of the journey person rate, which is very good in a high demand, busy industry. And you know, plumbers are like doctors. Everybody's always going to need one. And we really have a lot of enjoyable stress-free learning here at NSCC. You can come and really have fun while you learn the trade and also learn how to do it safely. So that's pretty good. I think, Megan, for me, if there's any questions or anything like that, please feel free. We'd like to clear up anything that anyone wants brought to light.
No questions yet.
Oh, okay.
So I'll pass things back to Tyler. I know you touched a little bit on the hands-on component and how much is kind of split between classroom and shop. But if you'd be able to talk a little bit more about experiential learning and how that prepares our students for not only their work terms, but for industry. And we have a couple photos on the screen here as well. So the one on the far right, I'm not terribly sure which campus that is, but that would be a traditional kind of shop classroom for our students, and really just how important it is to have those learning mistakes in our classrooms versus out on a work term. So while accidents happen and making mistakes certainly does happen, having those be learning moments, educational moments.
Perfect. So some experiential learning, to be quite honest, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the two left pictures that are on there are of your shop, Jacob. And yes, that's one of the things. Yeah, that's one of the things that my students did last year. So sometimes projects like this will come along where we'll have either interior or external opportunities. So to be quite honest, about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity. I was asked by a contractor if we'd like to partake in pouring a foundation, and I'll be very straight to. It depends on where you're located and what the ability to transport and travel to be able to do some of these projects are. But people approach NSCC all the time, and one of my comments to the students and to managers and even co-faculty is, we get the opportunity to spend somebody else's money on a project where we can actually go and treat it just like a job site, as long as it meets the outcomes of our program, as long as it's reasonable for being able to get students to and from there, and as long as it's going to be safe enough to do it as students. If all the documentation lines up, then we head out and we do some on-site experiential learning outside of just the work term. Now, those don't come every day for us, to be quite honest. I've done more in the shop, in the compound. So some of our experiential learning here at the Cumberland campus is we have a big compound, lots of space to actually shoot grades and use layout tools to frame buildings. One of the things that's kind of a hallmark here is we do build sheds. One of the things we don't do here is build the exact same shed year after year. So a couple of the sheds this year have hip roofs on them instead of gable roofs. We'll do different types of siding. Sometimes people will want some stuff on the interior, whether it happens to work with our casework, millwork design and installation courses. We'll do that, sometimes some shelving units or something. The other thing too is for the exterior finish, different types of siding. So vinyl siding sometimes we'll use pre-finished panel siding. Some people used to call it ranch wall, but it's fairly simple. It comes pre-finished from the factory. And it acts as the structural sheathing and the siding. A little more often, we find ourselves doing cedar shingles and clapboards. Not because they're cheaper, that's definitely not it, but because it does give you a more difficult task than installing vinyl siding. So in vinyl siding is by no means something that anyone can just throw up and do. You can learn to and do it well. But there's a little bit more skill and labor involved in fitting, joining, and setting wood siding, for instance, like cedar shingles and clapboards or vertical board and batten, than there is with the vinyl siding. So if we have somebody willing to spend that kind of money, sometimes we'll build sheds on spec and then hope to sell them back to folks in the industry. We've used some before as fundraisers, but when we build them the exact same way we would do a house. So we're not framing sheds out of 2x2 and 2x3 like you will see some of those factory built sheds. We frame them as if it's going to be a regular residence. We frame them to the National Building Code. So some of our stuff is a little heavier duty than most of your run-of-the-mill garden sheds, but they will last a good long while. Some of the other experiential learning may not necessarily be us getting our hands in industry, because to be quite honest, there's some liability and some issues that go with that. But industry sites and tours, to be very fair, just in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 different commercial builders reach out to me looking to get in front of our students because there is such demand for the trade. And from that, hopefully next year, I will be going to visit with my class at least 2 different job sites through Nova Scotia, and maybe even in conjunction with some of the other carpentry programs that are offered at other campuses. So maybe if somebody here on the webinar is actually enrolled in one of our programs, maybe you'll run into me when we tee up with a couple of campuses going to visit industry on their setting. Now, it's not us going to work, but it does give us a chance to talk to industry leaders, company owners, superintendents and supervisors, project managers, as well as typically folks that are rank and file tradespeople. So whether they're carpenters there doing concrete or framing or steel studs and interior systems, whether it happens to be plumbers, electricians, and HVAC workers. We'll get to see them in their setting and actually see some of the components and things there. And I'll be honest, those have been really, really good. When I worked out of the campuses in Halifax and even out of the Valley, and that's what the other shop there on the right is the Kingstead campus. I'm pretty sure I spent a few years there. But in the Valley campus, we used to drive into Halifax and we'd go to Barrett Lumber and Truss. They'd give us a tour of their truss plant. We'd see how trusses were designed and built, and they were excellent as an industry partner supporting us in doing that. And we'd almost always go into another company called StressCon down in Bedford. They do precast concrete buildings, bridges, bridge abutments, all kinds of things there. And it opens up a whole lot of worlds. So those are some of the other things aside from, so I give you an example of let's say tools one. Tools one is all hand tools. When you come in, so we go over proper selection, maintenance, and use of the hand tools. And most of our courses will have a project associated with them. So at the end of the hand tools course, you will have built a sawhorse to my design specs with some hand cut joinery and cut all of the materials with hand tools, fit them with hand tools, so chisels and planes and whatnot. And you'll make a sawhorse that you will use for the rest of the semesters here at the campus. Portable tools, we make a little workbench caddy that you can take around at different job sites, but we always try and match whatever project will be something useful that we either need in the shop or that you might use in your trade as it is. But it's not about what we build, it's about how we build it and the layout and all the stuff that goes into it. So then we'll fast forward into framing. We may be framing sheds more often than not, but it's just because it's what we have the space and what we're able to move and recoup some of our costs back. There has been some talk with Habitat for Humanity up here before about doing a modular build for a house where we frame all the walls for the house and then they'll truck it to a location, which kind of excites me a little bit, but at the same time, it'd be cooler to actually just build the whole house here on blocks and then have them truck the house away if they could do that. But it all really depends on what offer comes depending on the year and the projects at hand. I guess I'll ask, is there something else that you feel, Megan, that in there for experiential learning, maybe an example that I might have missed that I can speak to, or somebody have a question?
No, I think that's perfect. And what about for plumbing, Jacob? I think it's really neat how the carpentry students built out the plumbing shop, and so it kind of lends its hand to how all of these different trades end up working together. So creating those collegial relationships. But what about for your students, Jacob?
Yeah, well, one thing I guess I could touch on, we don't really have a lot of field trips per se to go out and see places locally here where I am in Cumberland. I'm not sure if they do that at other campuses or not. Perhaps they do. I know there's water treatment plants and sewage treatment plants and whatnot. That would be really neat, maybe in the future to go and visit. One thing that we tend to do is I'll take a few students at a time around in the afternoons at the campus, at the facility itself, and we will go through how you would troubleshoot different fixtures within the building, how to align faucet handles and fix leaky faucets, and then we'll go around and prime flush out drains and test eye washes and emergency showers. We'll basically take apart components of a urinal, for example, or a different types of toilets that we have available here in the campus. Some of them run off of pumps and jets, so we're able to go around our facility here at the campus and sort of do little tours and go into the water entry room and learn kind of as we go. And practice on these and learn how to adjust different fixtures and appliances, so that when we go out in the field, we'll already have that type of knowledge. One huge advantage that we have at a lot of our campuses, if not all of them, just like the one that our carpentry students built for us here in the Amherst Learning Center, is that we have live water connections to our shops. So everything that the students are able to build, we're also able to test under full pressure with water, or air test the plastic drain pipe or the metal drain piping, for example. And we also have a full-on functional drain system underneath the mock-up, we'll call it, like the framing that we have. So we have 8 individual washrooms. We're able to make those fully functional, hot and cold water, fully functioning drains, and then test and inspect all the work afterwards. So it's actually really neat to see that all come together, and for a student to be able to lay out a washroom on how to put everything in before the drywall during the roughing, I guess I'll call it, or the initial stage, and then also to see the final fixtures get installed and water running through them. It's really nice to see that type of thing. So I hope that pretty well covers what we were getting at there.
Yeah, perfect. So we have about 15 minutes left to go, but would either of you like to talk about the connection to industry, and maybe talk a little bit about how these programs are pre-apprentice programs? What is the difference between entering the trade without NSCC experience versus with? So what is NSCC going to provide a learner with entering into the industry?
Yeah, I'll touch on that first there, Megan. Thank you. I think the biggest advantage that NSCC has, as Tyler mentioned earlier, is the ability to learn and to make mistakes during your initial pre-employment here at NSCC, where you're going to have a full year of experience and knowledge to go out in the field, as opposed to getting a job in a trade and having to go in sort of blind on day one. In some cases, a lot of the students who show up and are very serious about their industry of study, they don't even necessarily leave here as a first year. Obviously, for wage, that's the way it goes with apprenticeship. But as far as the skill set and knowledge that their students here that leave as a second or sometimes a third year apprentice, as far as skill set and knowledge goes, and the advantages that these students would have in their journey into the industry to take on an apprenticeship is very key. Also, there's a high demand for companies that are going to hire somebody. They're always asking if they are able to take the pre-employment or the core level programs at NSCC first, because they know that they've already had experience and a lot of practice that goes along with any trade. So that's huge. As far as trying to get a job, to get employment after, there's a very high success rate in doing that. So that's pretty well where I'll leave that.
I'll throw in 2 cents. The other connection we have to industry as well is our trade advisory committee. So I co-chair the Carpentry Faculty Working Group. That's basically just a group of all the carpentry faculty across the province. And we look at standards and outcomes and all kinds of things that are a little more technical than anyone cares to. But a lot of the times when we revamp or look at stuff, like currently my program's under review, some of it will come from industry and some of their feedback to us through the TAC committee, which is a trade advisory committee. So we definitely try and listen to what industry has to say. I'll be honest though, there's sometimes as a faculty member on the board there are things the industry asks for that don't mimic the actual proper training of a carpenter. And I say proper, how it's been broken down into the Red Seal or into the apprenticeship program. So there was a comment given to me once that, well, when they come out, they can't do finished hardwood stairs after 2 years. Well, that's because we weren't focusing just on finished hardwood stairs. We've done framing. We've done, you've already heard me do the list. And to be quite frank, that wouldn't be until the 3rd year, second half, almost a 4th year apprentice block, unless that's the only thing you were doing in the industry. So we definitely try and go hand in hand, and we do listen to them. Sometimes we'll change curriculum that suits what industry's looking for. And there's other times where we still have to stick with what we are covering off, depending on what the actual topic happens to be. So definitely there. And not only that, I mentioned it already, but I keep my fingers in the pot when it comes to what's going on in industry. I worked industrial commercial more so than residential. I did work for Habitat for Humanity as well, and I keep in contact with a lot of the folks that I ran into. They know I'm here at the college, and there's sometimes where they're able to contact me because there's something we can do as a program, as a trade for them and what they're doing. And the trade-off on that sometimes for me could be as simple as, hey, I get to go to a Habitat build, spend Habitat money or someone's money on framing and do a project that we don't have to tear down, or it's not just a shed. It gets to be a home for someone. It gets to be a final product. And that makes a big difference in the classroom when we're doing something that's going to be used as it's intended. No, because most people look at, we're just building a shed. Well, it may be just a shed to you, but that could be someone's shed. I mean, heck, if you watch the Trailer Park Boys, Bubbles is a big, big fan of his shed. That shed is his castle. We should treat it no different. But it's a bit of a stretch to kind of sell that to folks in the classroom. So we do try and keep stuck with or connected to industry and feelers out there.
So this slide passes things on to a question that's just come in about students and graduates being able to stay in Nova Scotia. So for both plumbing and carpentry, what are you seeing as far as work? Is there work in the province for either of these trades?
Yeah, there absolutely is, Megan. In fact, most core level programs in plumbing that are 1 year before the 5-week work term, like we're about to start here next week, we've actually been approached by multiple companies and employers in the area and all over the province looking to recruit, some decent apprentices that have gone through the core level program with a decent foundation of skills and knowledge. So normally in the past, these students would have to take it upon themselves to make phone calls, do site visits, send in information to try to get a work placement, and things, in the trades, and more particularly, I'll speak to plumbing, are that busy now that the students actually were getting indirectly contacted through me, through the local mechanical supplier. In most cities and towns, there's employers that are crying and can't keep up, finding people to stay close to, their homes and where they've actually chose to do their study. It's not just having to go out west or move away to get work. There's a boatload of work all over the province, quite frankly. So things are really looking up with the trades, and more particularly, I'll speak to plumbing. I'm sure it's the same the rest of the way. I know Tyler can take over or chime in here for that. So good question. Thanks.
Yeah, and back again to sitting on some of the committees here for carpentry. We had a thing from Apprenticeship Nova Scotia that looked at the demographic, and as far as skilled trades in Nova Scotia, carpentry is in the red. We're losing more and more folks to retirement. And it's not a mandatory certified trade in the province. And I say that with a bit of sorrow. So it means you don't have to have a red seal, but I'll be quite honest. The core skills that you build here at NSCC, and if you decide to go down the road of getting your red seal, I liken it to, would you give someone your vehicle without them having a license? And generally the answer, I say generally, it's not always, the answer is no. And I say, well, then why would you hand over your home to someone who hasn't demonstrated at least the minimum standard or a base standard, something measurable by attaining the red seal? So there is a huge amount of work that we get calls, the same as Jacob said. The one comment I will make to that, and I don't want to sound like I'm the bearer of bad news, but if you come in to take the 2-year program or a 1-year program, you have to remember that you spent most of your time here in the shop. And as far as industry is concerned, you're still that first year apprentice sitting on there. You might have enough hours, you might have the theory gone, but you haven't put in the time on the job site yet. And that is a bit of a world of difference. We try and mimic it as much as we can. But even the best students that have left here had a wonderful experience. Say, I learned so much in such a shorter period of time when I was in industry, but I don't know that I would have if I hadn't taken the program. So that's what I love to hear. But it is a reality. So when you go out there, you might not be doing layout, although you learned how to do layout. You might not be the saw person. You could be lugging materials for a little while. And to be quite honest, they talk about apprentices paying their dues, and that is part of it. And it still is ingrained in some of the trades there. So one of the things I tell my students when I tell them there's lots of work, there is lots of work. It's not always the exact work you want. But as an entry person into the trade, you're going to take some of those jobs. To be quite honest, I'm a red seal now. I work at the college. I don't really go looking to do roof shingles anymore. It's not something that I ever enjoyed. It's not something I want to do lots of. And I'm in that position in my career. 15 years ago, if there was no work going on and somebody had roofs to be shingled, I would be all over that because that's how I make my money. That's how I support things. So you do have to remember that you got to take the good with the bad sometimes, but there is a lot of work on the go, and there seems to be scads of people here, even in Cumberland County, which is not the busiest section of the province, looking for skilled trades, looking for people to go in. So the one other piece of advice I'll throw out there too is to have a positive attitude, and those employability skills, I call them soft skills in my class, of being on time, being coachable, being able to work as a team, all those things and many more are really, really important too.
Those are really fantastic points from both of you. And if anyone is curious, I think the apprenticeship agency piece that Tyler was referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency released a report over COVID about the demand of skilled tradespeople working in Nova Scotia. So both plumbers and carpenters are needed in the province. And I think especially with our economy here in Nova Scotia, the demand for housing, the amount of people who are coming to live in Nova Scotia, so folks are buying houses, especially older houses. Houses need to be renovated or houses need to be built. And carpenters, plumbers are needed for both of those things to be done, whether or not it's someone putting a deck in, whether or not it's someone who has old plumbing systems and they're building a cabin, whatever it might be. Both will always be in need, regardless of where you are. I do want to touch on international learning quickly because I know we do have some international students attending this session. International students are welcome to apply for every single NSCC program with the exception of one. So we have over 130 programs. There's only one program where we cannot accept international students, and that's our Med Lab Tech program. But as far as plumbing, carpentry, any of the other trades programs that we offer, we do welcome international students into all of our campuses. And our internationalstudents.nscc.ca webpage outlines the full application process, all of the required documents, absolutely everything that you might need to know about applying as an international student can be answered on that page. Just as we have a couple of minutes left, Tyler and Jacob have done a fantastic job at outlining how NSCC prepares students for successful careers, and how they both help to support students from the moment that you apply and start considering NSCC right up until that graduation point, when students are working within industry. Touching on tuition, so our 2022 tuition has not been released yet. It should be updated in the coming weeks. But tuition for all of our programs for domestic students is $3,620. And for international students, right now it's $11,690. However, most programs do have some additional costs in the form of textbooks, supplies, technology, etc. Very quickly, both Jacob and Tyler, do you want to outline some of those additional costs that a student may need to prepare for when they are kind of budgeting for their education?
So I'll throw out my quick answer here. I have a tool list. The tool list is approximately $300 to $400, and it can balloon or it can shrink depending on the quality. The $300 to $400 is trade quality, decent tools, not the highest end, not the lowest end, but stuff that'll get you going. The other thing that I also tell students to look at is possible trips off-site. So if we get the chance to do off-site learning, sometimes if my class is participating in the student government, there are funds from the student association that your student fees go into that you can get to help offset the cost of fuel to get to a different site that day if we're approved to work there. But sometimes that's not an option. So we may not be in the classroom all the time. So the other thing that I would throw in there for some stuff that I encourage students to do. So workwear, you would have noticed when I did have my camera on, I'm in overalls. I wear overalls most of the time. I'm here at the campus because I teach as you build, train as you fight kind of deal. So when I do a demonstration, I'm used to having my pencils and pens and everything in a certain manner. And we do work outside. So just today, we've got this windstorm and rain happening. We were up on the hill in the compound, and somebody said, "Well, I didn't bring a sweater or rain gear today." And I said, "Well, that was a mistake when you showed up, because I told you we were working not through a torrential downpour, but we are working until it gets to the point that it's unsafe or that it's not good for the learning environment." And that's not just the second that a sprinkle happens, much to the chagrin of some folks some days. So those would be a couple of things that I would hit off.
Yeah, those are some good points there, Tyler, no doubt. Yeah, as far as the biggest thing as far as plumbing goes would be your personal protective equipment, your PPE. So everybody that wants to gain access into the shop or the lab for the practical component of the program, you would need things like safety glasses, safety boots, safety gloves, ear protection, to make sure that you are protected and granted access to even get into the shop. Those are a requirement by the college. And a couple of basic hand tools wouldn't go astray either. Could be as simply as a tape measure, a hammer, pencil, hacksaw. We do have all those things here at the Cumberland campus. I know other campuses you will be given a list and expected to supply basic hand tools. Here at the Amherst Learning Center, we pretty well have enough to go around for a class section of basic tools. So that's not something that we're too concerned with here. More or less for the safety side of it, and things like a calculator, colored pencils for when you're labeling the different piping schematics and that type of stuff. But overall, it's not going to break the bank as far as what you're going to need to supply to take this. And one other thing I'll touch on to get down to the meat of the potato. I mean, everybody wants to talk about money, and that's why we're all doing what we're doing. So I know that 1 year after taking a plumbing course, a lot of these students after 1 year of training are going to be able to go out as a first-year apprentice and make close to $20 an hour, which is actually really good money when you think about it right off the hop for 1 year of training. So there's nothing wrong with bringing that to light, and that's all part of it. So that was something that I wanted to touch on as well, Megan. So we're good on my end.
Excellent, thank you. So as we are wrapping things up, oh my goodness, we're perfect on timing, 2:59. To stay connected, of course, follow us on all of our social channels, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We post highlights about our programs, little reels, videos, etc. And any updates to our programs will be posted first and foremost on our website, but also on those social channels that you see on your screen. All of our questions that we have had were answered throughout the session, but of course, if you do have any other questions, send us an email to recruitment@nscc.ca, and I can either relay those questions if you do send them to Jacob or Tyler, and connect you if need be. So Jacob and Tyler, thank you so much for helping out with this session. I hope it was informative for everyone. And if you do want to check out some of our other webinars, you can certainly do that, nscc.ca/webinars. And hopefully we have provided an informative session for you this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for hosting, Megan. It was really fluid. Good job.
Awesome, and thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for taking an hour out of your day to spend it with us this afternoon. Thanks again. I'll say bye for now, and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.